What's up, Liron here, and today we're recreating a painting by John Yardley. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another vid. Today what we're gonna do is recreate this painting by John Yardley. This is my version of it, of course. Hopefully you saw the episode of Painting Masters in which I reviewed John Yardley. I will put a link somewhere in the bottom or in the top corner or anywhere at all, and you can go see that and look at the review of his different works. An excellent artist, a very interesting one. A very unique approach that I think could really serve beginners as well, because he works in different patches and areas and he doesn't care about having everything blended together and working really fast and being nervous about that. So I think that's a very good thing. So then I created this as a part of that episode, just recreating one of his paintings that I really liked. You know, I'm a sucker for landscapes, impressionistic, that's what I like the most, cityscapes, these kinds of things. So what we're gonna do in this video is I'm gonna show you how I recreate it. We're gonna use that as the reference, and you're going to see this. And this is it. I'm really excited about this. I think doing studies of masters is really important and a good way of improving and kind of getting into their head. And this is it. Let's get started.
Okay, so as always, I start with the drawing in mind. Now, I want to take care of all of the proportions, so you will see me measure quite a bit here. You see I'm putting my finger there and trying to find a fifth, because the water where it meets the dock is kind of fifth way through. So now I'm putting in some very gentle details for the boats, and I'm going to run through the drawing stage because the drawing isn't that important for this particular video in my opinion. It is important generally speaking, but in any case, in just a moment you will be able to see the reference again. The reference picture is actually his painting. And I just want to comment at this stage that painting based on someone else's painting has its advantages and disadvantages. It's not a long-term solution for anything because you have to learn how to create your own impression of the things you see. So the easy part with this is that you have someone else's impression of the view, but the advantage and the reason why I did it is because I want to study from John Yardley, how he approaches these kinds of things. And painting like someone else really forces you to get into their head if you do strive to get a similar result to what they got. Okay, so once in a while I'll make these studies, and this one was for the Painting Masters episode about John Yardley. So yeah, now I'm measuring horizontally. That happens a lot as well. So I did this painting again as a part of the original episode, but then I asked and you said that you wanted to see the full process. So hopefully you'll enjoy that. And I think it's a bit of a long process, so it's a good opportunity for us to just talk about some general stuff while I'm doing that. So again, getting all of the main shapes in there, the windows, that mini roof there, and while I'm drawing, I'm already trying to figure out what the meaning is of every shape I'm working on. And it's funny because some things you only realize after you finished painting, which is funny. Because you saw the ins and outs of a specific scene, so you know what the painting is all about sometimes only after you finish it, and then you're like, oh, I should have done this differently, I should have done that differently, but that's exactly the point, to learn these kinds of things. What I did notice immediately after finishing this, when I finish I look back at the original one and compare, what I did notice was how much more subtle and accurate his work is, and how much more freshness it had, and how many more details there were. Now, he probably painted on a much larger piece of paper than me. I worked in a rather small, it's like an eighth of a sheet. He probably worked on like a half or a quarter. I think it was like a half a sheet. So yeah, and now just giving you some zoomed in view of the actual boats. So in any case, when you paint smaller, you have to reduce the details. And also, if he worked from direct observation, which I wouldn't be surprised if he did, then you get to better see everything. So that's not an excuse on my part. I'm just saying that when you're there, it's much easier. I find that it's becoming much easier for me to paint from real life than from photos in many instances. It depends on the mood, but So anyway, I'm really happy, but I just wanted to talk a bit about the YouTube channel in general. I'm very pleased with the direction it's going. Many of you have seen my interview of Steve Mitchell from The Mind of Watercolor. If you haven't, you definitely want to check it out. It's one of the more recent videos, and I'm very pleased with it, and I'm very happy with that direction of interviewing other artists that I appreciate, and I do plan on making more of these. By the way, notice how detailed he went with this part here, where the market is and the people, and you'll see this later on as well. And I will put a link to the original reference photo, of course, as well. But really, he went very detailed there. So regarding the videos of interviews with other artists, I do plan on making a lot of these. It's going to be turned into a series, and I think it'll help this channel grow, and it'll help me reach other people. And also, I think it's really cool to see these kinds of collaborations and just bringing people closer together in this in the watercolor community, maybe even just the YouTube community. So I'm gonna definitely update you on that and on upcoming interviews and upcoming talks as soon as I can. So now I'm done with everything almost. All I'm trying to do is go over some lines that are a little weaker, need strengthening, because I know that some of them are gonna disappear when I put in the first wash, So now I'm starting with a wash for the sky, and again, this video is titled How to Paint Like John Yardley, and I'm really painting like him. He doesn't work like very even or trying to cover everything up with an initial wash and then breaking it down. He kind of just paints areas. He said he works his way around the painting, or he starts from the background. So I decided to do the same here, and I'm working from the sky, which is essentially the background. And then he makes his way forward and just colors or paints whatever part of the painting that makes the most sense for him at that moment. There are a bit of background noises here. They're doing some constructions outside. Hopefully that doesn't interfere too much with the narration. So in any case, what's good about this method, and the reason why I even wanted to share it, was that his method doesn't force you to work really fast and make sure nothing dries on you, because what he does is really just work in areas. So he'll choose an area, fill it up, choose another area, fill it up. And he's not the only one working that way. I do remember seeing other artists that say that they do that, and seeing other demos of people do that. And I think it's a very interesting and refreshing method to work in, especially for so long following artists that work a different way. And what's really great about it is the result. That's you see that the results are beautiful, and this really encourages you. I want to say a few words about the materials I'm using, because I always get asked about it, and I still haven't added this permanently to the video description. So the paper is a Saunders Waterford. That's 300 grams, I believe, or it could be 600. I don't remember. The brushes I'm using, you see, are a mix. I'm using mostly this Princeton brush, and I like that because it allows me for a lot of accuracy. It's a synthetic brush. It's not necessarily the most high quality, but I like it, and it does the job for me. And also maybe a bit of the silver black velvet brushes that I love so much. This one is sized, I believe, 12, but I could be wrong. But that's the general area, 12, 8. These are the sizes I work at. If I'm working on a larger piece, like quarter sheet or half a sheet, I will have also a 14 or 16 size brushes. The palette I'm using is the Magello 19 Wells. It's the one I'm using indoors the most. The paint I'm using is all Daniel Smith in this particular process. Okay, so I'm using the colors you see here are a mix. I'm using as a blue probably only French ultramarine for now. I may use a bit of phthalo blue later on for the boats or some details, but generally, the main blue in this one is the French ultramarine. For the reds, I'm using quite a few of these. I'm using the Pyrrole Scarlet that you see at the corner. I'm using a bit of quinacridone rose, and a lot of burnt sienna that you see me dipping into now. For the roof, the oranges are done with the Daniel Smith burnt sienna. What else is important here? The yellow is Hansa Yellow Medium. That's my favorite kind of yellow as of now, but I'll probably switch it. I want to try a lot of different colors for the yellows and the reds. I want to try and replace some of the ones I'm using here. So what you see now is a mixture of orange with the blue. So I used some of the reds and yellows to create orange and the burnt sienna to create the orange. And then I just dull it out using the blue. Okay, that's a good way of thinking about it. If you're thinking about color harmonies in general, you may find that a good way is to create one secondary color and then kind of mute it or gray it out with the third primary. So if we would create a green using the yellow and the blue, then we'll mute it using the red. Okay, so that's a good way of thinking about it. And I am keeping things rather simple. I don't want to go too crazy with the colors. You see I'm leaving some white spaces later on for highlights, just where I see them, okay, because they aren't present everywhere, they're just in some areas. And then I'm going back with some darker paint to get in those, to make the most out of this wash. But John says he doesn't work too much wet in wet. He says he loses the colors, I guess, strength like that, and wet in wet does take a lot of control. So it's very interesting seeing an artist that doesn't use wet in wet, almost, not a lot at least, if not at all. He just makes a separation between the areas he paints. He will use wet next to wet, he said, like I'm doing now, the wet roof and then the wet chimney, but he doesn't always, but he almost never uses actual wet in wet too much. So now I'm doing the shadow here on the building, and I do think I'm missing a bit of yellow on it, so maybe I'll add that later on. But it's funny because this is one of the main shapes that are gonna be white, like completely white. Almost everything here isn't, except for the highlights on the sails of the boats, and yeah, so this building, the shape here is really important, as I talked about in the Painting Masters episode, because these are gonna lead the viewer's eye, and I really analyzed this painting, very in a very detailed manner, and these shapes are really important to carry out the viewer's eye. So now I'm just being careful between the washes here, trying not to have them touch too much, because then it will reactivate the orange from earlier. So you do want to be aware of that. And again, a lot of people say that watercolor is all about flowiness, and if you have some broken edges like this, that's wrong and it feels like a cutout. And then again and again, I see proofs that that's just incorrect. Artists like John do it that way, and their results are beautiful, and they're full of life. And if you exploit the whole wet in wet thing in just one part of the painting, that goes a long way. You don't have to have everything mixed together. And my approach is to sometimes let everything mix together in the first wash, but this painting proves that you don't have to do that. Okay, so this is the main point here. And this is exactly why I enjoy doing this. I think another artist I will enjoy doing a study of is Votsmush. Alexander Mushtov, I believe that's his name, the real name. And I also talked about him in another episode of Painting Masters. I think because he does things, again, very differently from the way I do, I think I'll learn a lot from him, because he's also a master of the medium. He's really good with watercolor and controlling them wet in wet, and so that's amazing. What you see now is a loose mix of some burnt sienna and the French ultramarine, a very common mix for creating grays, but it's not a complete gray because it does have a bit of yellow in it and a bit of, some other details. So that's a car on the left, and it was a very complex impression to get, but I think with this car I really did a good job. And now I'm connecting the shadow of the car and the shadow under the tree to the shadow under the market and the awnings, and this is really an important part, because I think it will attract a lot of attention from the boats, because there's this strong, rich, dark patch of paint under them. And notice how I'm trying to vary it and not make it boring. So I'm using all three primaries to create purples and greens and a bit of oranges, just secondary colors there inside the mix to have some interest. Because really, if you're going to use the same color for black or shadow, it could be a bit boring. Now I do have, again, examples of the opposite of that, people that break that quote-unquote rule, so it does work, So now I'm continuing with the shadow. I am negative painting around the sails and some other highlights, which is incredibly important because we're going to add some details there later on. I do think that I should make my washes a little wetter because you see there isn't a lot of flowiness. Was that the word I'm looking for? There isn't enough flow in my opinion there. It has to do with the brush as well. These synthetic brushes can't hold too much water. So now we're on to what I think is my favorite part of this, probably one of my favorite parts of this painting, which are the boats. Doing this in one go, left to right. And the reason why I'm doing this left to right is because it's an elongated shape. It's just easier to do it that way. So what I'm focusing on here is just negative painting around the highlights of the boats. And trying to utilize some wet in wet here. He again didn't use wet in wet here. It seems like he just used wet on dry. Let the first layer wash dry and then come back and add some details there. But I do want to bring out some more of that wet in wet. So I guess I did do my personal spin on it. So right now we're about halfway through the process. We're almost done with the initial wash of putting in the major shapes, and then the next stages are going to be adding some more of the details. And this is where usually I have the hardest time, and that is with the second wash. My problem with the second wash usually is that here I'm adding just a bit more wet and wet. My problem with the second wash is that I'll usually go too dark. And so what happens was I would have a very light initial wash and then a very dark second wash and nothing in between. And that would really make, some people commented that they like this punchy style, the punchy contrast. But for me, I want to achieve more of a realistic look. And to do that, you really have to nail the values down properly. So this is something I've been working on remedying in my style, of just trying, and sorry that you don't see the mixing too much in this particular one. But in any case, just trying to have that. It took me some time because I mixed this really thick paint, but this is something that I've been trying to work on improving, the whole nailing the values right in the first go. And I think this is what makes this painting so fresh and beautiful. I mean, his painting, not mine, even though mine is, I think, good as well. So now I'm switching to some blues. I'm using still French ultramarine just in its purest form. I may switch to, here I switched to the Winsor Blue by Winsor Newton. That's Phthalo Blue, it's the same. Or maybe I believe that's actually Phthalo Blue by Daniel Smith. And notice how it breaks the blue pattern really nicely, because all of this painting is based on French ultramarine, that then to finally see a different blue is a breath of fresh air as well. So this is why I like this. I added to the awning there as well, even though it's not exactly the same. I think he used a different blue, but again, colors don't matter this much. But back to values, which is the real thing here, the real important step. With this one, what I think I did well is nail the mid values and not just the highlights and then the dark stages, and this is really the strategy of painting. How do you build up your layers in a way that conveys what you want? You can do glazing and then lots and lots of layers, or you can try and get it in as many details as possible when you just start. So my fault or my issue was that I would do a very light initial wash, let everything mix together, and then I'll do a very dark second wash, and then I'll lose the middle. So my options here of shifting the way I work is to either do the initial wash a little darker and then move on and leave some highlights, and that way I'll have the mid values done from the first wash. Or what I can do is do the initial wash, let it all mix and be very light about it, but then instead of going straight into the shadows, I need to have a middle step where I'm putting the mid values. And this means using another wash that's just a little darker than the initial wash, just a little, because we also have the compounding effect of several layers. And this is a huge insight, by the way, that I came to about 6 months ago. I think I started noticing this was with the initial wash, you don't have to go as dark because you already have one wash, so you glaze on top of the previous wash, so there is a compounding effect of darkness. You see what I mean? And I would try. So what I would try to do is I would look at the painting or at the reference, and I would think this is really dark, and then I would mix the paint as dark as I thought it should be. But the problem was I forgot that I have a layer underneath it that will add to the darkness, because watercolors are transparent. So I would completely forget about that, and then everything would turn out to be too dark. And then I figured I already have a first wash that further darkens things. I can go a little lighter with that second wash. So in any case, I hope that makes sense, and I hope I didn't talk too much about that. Sometimes it's really hard to explain these concepts, so I'm really trying to verbalize them as best as I can. So now you saw a bit of wet and wet there inside inside the shadow to create some darker shadows. I will go over these parts again. It's actually been a while since I posted a full painting process, like really more in depth like this one. So let me know what you think of that. I do know some of you prefer the longer painting processes, and others less. I just noticed that they get less views, so I'm really trying to juggle between the two. Some negative painting there around the frame of the windows. So in any case, I am trying to juggle between the two because I do want to get views. So if I notice that something doesn't get as much views, I'll try to cater to more to what you want to watch. So yeah, maybe some people have less time for the longer processes, but I do know a lot do prefer to see the entire process. One of my favorite artists on YouTube that I barely get to talk about is Tim Wilmot. He has amazing tutorials that are full length, and he shows you everything he does, and he's really good. So in capturing the light and the shadow and the atmosphere. So Tim Wilmot, he's really good. Just search for him. Wilmot, that's WILMOT, I believe, or it could be a double T, but you'll find him for sure. Just because I never talked about him, and this reminded me this process. So now we're done with the mid values. We have some highlights. Now it's time to get the darkest, richest shadows here. So I'm starting with the boats. Some of the heaviest shadows are actually under the boats, and the reason why is because they're the closest to us. So the closer the object is, the more it has contrast, the more it has strength. So I'm trying to get in those shadows and also do some dry brush action. I find that it's much easier for me to do the dry brush with this kind of a strong bristle brush that is more synthetic. I think working smaller sizes makes it harder to do the dry brush. Sometimes you need a lot of space to go fast and to really push the brush against the paper. And with smaller paintings, you don't have that much. So now what I was actually trying to do, I don't even remember. I think I wet the water area. Yeah, I sprayed a bit of water in it, but I was blocking the top part of the painting so that it doesn't get too wet. I don't know why I just didn't follow the way he did it, because he didn't do this wet and wet. So I'm not sure why I didn't just follow that, but I guess I just wanted to do something of my own with this one. But anyway, now we're really we're really close to finishing this. I think just a few more details on the buildings and on the this is the stage where I actually go the slowest because I have some more time to react and everything is dry, so you don't have to work extremely fast before the wash dries or anything like that. You have time, you add just the details here and there. So yeah, I still haven't added the people, by the way, under the awnings in that kind of a market thing, so I will do that soon. Just adding the windows to the building on the left, and I'm still using pretty wet paint. I'm not doing this dry brush because I wanted to dry really light, I guess. So this is why I go at it in this particular order. Wow, it's been a long time since I recorded such a long narration. Very interesting. So now we're really near finishing. I think there's like 3 more minutes, just trying to figure out. So yeah, I'm darkening these shadows under the sheds. I think I should have kept them a little lighter, just so that it pushes the boats further to the front. But in any case, you can make a few mistakes here and there in the values, and it will still read not significantly, relatively okay. Now this is the part I really wanted to do dry brush. or just go at it very quick and loose, because these are just small details within the shadow, and details within the shadow tend to not be overemphasized in real life as well. So it's best to imitate that dry, broken, I guess, line. So yeah, this shadow here is actually important because it does pull the viewer's eye into the structure, the building itself from the boats. So it was important for me to get that in. Now we have some details on the sails as well, and there's also the details, the shadows under the rooftop on the left, as soon as I'll get that in, you'll see it's a major difference. But now I'm just spraying out some paint here, some reds, throwing that into the market, the crates. There are some crates there that it's really hard to see because I painted this a little smaller, but he was really able to get that detail. Some blue for the shirts of the people, or for the clothing items. It's just random paints thrown around, basically. Trying to still have it read well. He did a really good job, actually, with the small details on the people. And so, yeah, it's something that's always challenging when you work small, and also when you have to simplify a lot of things. It's really not easy. So yeah, I'm just doing my best. Now there's this quinacridone rose that I didn't use a lot purely, so now I'm adding that to the shed. Also in the reference in his painting, you can see this, that he used this or a very similar paint for that matter. So almost done here with the crates and all of the small details. The one thing again I have to do is add the shadow under the rooftop on the left, and also some balconies that you'll soon see me do. I really try not to go too messy in that stage that I'm doing right now, because I tend to... it's really hard to dumb down the impression of what you see. So and it's something that I still struggle with at times. So how to make one brushstroke look like a person, that's really hard. That takes a lot of practice. So now I added that shadow under the rooftop there, and I will add some lines for the balconies, these small kind of fences. I don't know what you'd call these. And yeah, this is almost done, really. If you take a few steps back, you will hopefully get the impression of what this is meant to look like. And I'm actually going to give you a view of the final result in just a moment. Here we go. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let's wrap it up. Okay, so here's the final result. I really hope you enjoyed this process. I'm not going to sign this one because it's not an original work by me, and I never signed these kinds of works, but I really hope you enjoyed this. I think I did a decent job. He did seem to have gotten many of the details a little more accurate, and there's a good reason for that. He had the advantage of actually seeing the scene and interpreting it from real life, and I'm basically painting based on a painting. Now, I will say this, I have the advantage of having someone already interpret this for me, which is a huge advantage as well. I didn't have to think about things. I could have just used his vision to get it to look similar, maybe. So in any case, I hope you enjoyed this one. What I'm going to do now is remove the tape, because that's the best moment. So let's do this together. I sometimes tape this for Instagram and such, just because it's the best stage, and I'm actually gonna do it now for my Instagram story. And getting that last piece of tape off, and here we go. Dropping some stuff here. So here we go, we've got a beautiful frame, and this hopefully closes it or frames it a little better. So I hope you enjoyed this process. Once again, I'm pleased with the result. This is what happens when you do a study. You're basing your work off of someone else. There are advantages and disadvantages, but I think you can learn quite a lot in terms of composition and color choice. And I wasn't, 100% accurate with the colors. I kind of just recreated what I saw, but I think it still works well. The one place I noticed that he has a much better and finer touch than me was around these dark
darker negative painting under the sheds. And also I think I could mute some of these just by putting another glaze. I could just do it now. And also this area here, that's a very interesting point of interest. And also there is this area, but this one I managed to do fine, I think. Here the shadows in his work are a little more intricate. It's also a larger painting, so I would assume that to be the case. And these boats as well, I think I got a really good impression, but of course you can always do a better job. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this one. Let's wrap it up. So this is it, friends. I really hope you enjoyed this one. Let me give you one final look at the final result here. I'm very pleased with this, and I think the trick is taking a few steps backwards and seeing what it looks like and if it reads well. And if it does, then hopefully you did a good job. I will say that after finishing one of these studies, I look at the original and I'm like, it's so much better. The original is so much better. It has such finesse, such small details that are a little better in every single way, but that's just how it is. It's really hard to, I would say, make something that's better than the source, than the original. This is just a study. It's more to learn about the composition and how the artist arranged different elements and really learn about like the boats, such a beautiful point of interest. And then we've got this building and there's a movement, it's very dynamic, and there's the market here with the awnings and the sheds and everything. Just a beautiful, beautiful scene, and I learned a lot from it, and I hope you learned a lot from hearing me narrate this as well. This is time to wrap up this video. Do check out my beginner's drawing course in the description box below, and many other good things there. My podcast, my Patreon page, my Instagram page, my Snapchat, everything is gonna be listed down there if you want to learn more about me and so on. And thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all of the support. Like, it's incredible, really. And it really is what moves me forward and helps me and encourages me to bring myself to the edge of creating the best content I can. So thank you so much, and I will keep doing this, and I will see you again in another vid real soon.